If you don't want to be recorded, let me know and I will pause the recording so that you will not be recorded. Later, the video will be uploaded to our private YouTube channel.
All right. Thank you, Georgie. I think we do have folks for all the roles filled. And
Well, there's a timer role. I'm the timer.
Yep.
Mr.
Go
Toastmaster.
ahead.
So very quickly, I'm the timer today. So if you in the grid view of Zoom, you can see one of the windows has the timer, and I'll operate that time. For the speakers, I think we have 2 speakers today, and each speaker would be speaking 5 to 7 minutes. So a 5-minute green light will come on, 6-minute the yellow, and then a 7-minute the red light, and then the speaker 30 seconds to finish. Tape evaluation 2 to 3 minutes, and then table topics 1 to 2 minutes, and I will report the time at the end of the meeting, Mr. Toastmaster.
I just want to say one thing. My speech is going to run a little long, so I'll be, I think, 6 to 8 minutes or so, maybe 8.
And we'll do.
Thank you very much, Georgie. So we have all the roles filled. Let me
We
repeat
don't
the
have a joke
speakers and the
master.
evaluator. Yeah. Would anyone like to be a joke master? Okay, we have Saurabh. Saurabh, long time no see. Welcome back. Would you like to be a joke master?
Oh, I haven't prepared anything. Sorry about that. But next time
Okay.
I'll try to be there.
Thank you. How about Weming?
Say that
I'll
again.
see what I can do. I'll see what I can do.
Weming? Okay, thanks. All right. We have speakers and evaluators. So our first speaker is.
Do you want to give an invocation about the theme of the day?
I think I can cook it up, but I haven't prepared. Let me introduce the speaker and the evaluator, then I can give an invocation speech for a minute.
Okay.
Okay. We have.
Excuse me, Gautam.
Yep, go ahead, Jose.
Yes, I got the word now. So,
Okay.
good morning, fellow Toastmasters, honored guests. The word for today is materialism. It's a noun. So, it's preoccupation with physical comfort and things. Again, the word is materialism. Try to put that in your speech and whatever you speak, so that, like I said, you learn how to tailor your speech to certain words. And I will report at the end of the meeting how everybody did. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jose. We need one evaluator for our second speaker, Wyming. Our first speaker is Georgie. Second speaker is Wyming. And the evaluator for Georgie is Jose. We need one evaluator for Wyming.
I can give an evaluation for me.
Thank you, Georgie. Okay, so we have all the roles full. I think we can start. Once again, thank you everyone for joining today. So the theme of the day today is freedom. It was a Juneteenth week. I was wondering what about the topic of the today's meeting. Then I got the word freedom. I like the word freedom. Freedom involves a lot of factors. It can comes into a different version of freedom or different perspective of freedom, whether it is freedom in terms of financial freedom, in terms of your rights, freedom in terms of your liberty. It has like different flavors. Not everyone will get same amount of freedom, whether you are expressing your thought, whether you are expressing your emotions within your friends. There are different flavors, different amount of freedom that everyone will get. At the end of the day, it comes down to one single word: humanity. If you know the humanity and if you know how to handle the humanity, and you pretty much aware of what freedom is. If you are being ambitious, if you are being a person who can think from in the multiple perspective of everything, then you can materialize the freedom. And being a person who understands humanity, being a person who can materialize things, you can encourage, motivate others to come up with their expressions come up with their thoughts to express their freedom. Please speak up for freedom and don't let yourself hold by anything. Thank you again. So we have our first speaker of the day today. It's Georgie. Georgie is going to give a speech on the topic When Genius Failed. Georgie has been one of our long-time member of the group, and she has been giving speech on various topics ranges from stocks, finance, self-improvement, and now we have When Genius Failed. Let's hand it over to Georgie. Welcome, Georgie.
Today, I'm going to talk about a book that I recently read called When Genius Failed. It was published in 2000 and talks about the long-term capital management hedge fund and its collapse. It was the largest hedge fund to collapse so far. The thing I want to start by describing is what a hedge fund is. The concept is behind the name. Hedge means to make sure that you scale back some of your risks so that in theory you won't have as large a loss as you might possibly have. Conversely, you won't have the same size of gains as well. That might cut into it as well. The other thing that it is it's actually a type of financial vehicle in a way that has very low regulation. The SEC requires that people that invest in hedge funds, organizations, have large amounts of money. So in theory, they should be very sophisticated investors. And if they choose to get into these funds that often invest in alternative investments that use very sophisticated financial models like derivatives, swaps, synthetics, it's their business if they lose their money, not the SEC's. The concept behind long-term capital management is that it was the perfect marriage behind academia and business. The two partners from academia were Merton and Scholes, who both won Nobel Prizes in economics for their financial modeling of pricing of options. The business side of the house came from the arbitrage desk at Salomon Brothers, including Meriwether and Haghani, sorry. The fund was thought of as the best and brightest, literally geniuses. And as a result, they were able to run huge amounts of money. They got $2.5 billion. At the time, a typical fund only raised 1% of that kind of money. They also had over double the fee size. They charged 2% an annual fee plus 25% of any profits they made. A typical fund only did about 1% with 20% of the profits. The other thing that was unusual is that they made their investors commit their money for a minimum of 3 years. The other thing that they did was, and this is something they were very clear with their investors about from the beginning, is that they were going to leverage the fund very heavily, up to 25 and more percent. When we think of leverage, we tend to think of something like maybe getting a loan on a house. You put a small down payment on it, and then you get this loan, you can leverage it so you can buy something really big like a house. That's not exactly the way hedge funds think about it. They think about borrowing cash from a bank. They then use this money to go buy securities. They then take the securities to another bank and use it as collateral for another loan to get more cash. And then they keep doing this over and over. So it actually looks a lot more like this when you think about it. And it kind of makes sense how one fund could possibly bring down multiple banks and the entire global financial network simultaneously. The other thing that long-term capital management has an advantage, in addition to a long-term commitment for their money and highly leveraged, is that because so many Wall Street banks wanted to work with these geniuses, they would give them money at low or no fee loans or very small amounts of collateral required for their deals. As a result, they could leverage their arbitrage concept to look for tiny price differentials, but far smaller price differentials than most people would look for across the market. We're talking on the order of like 10 basis points. Because it was a very tiny amount of money, but leveraged multiple times, they could get some pretty big amounts of money out of it. But it was kind of the equivalent to picking up nickels and dimes while in front of bulldozers. The fund started out really, really well. Their returns after their fees were in the first year 20%, in the next 2 years after that, and 40%. It started going down in 1997 because their models were not that unusual. It was those models basically were being taught across financial programs across the world. What was different was that people were starting to use the models more. But the other thing that was happening is that the partners in the fund were getting tired of managing other people's money. So they forced their investors to take their money back. $2.7 billion was returned to investors. That increased the leverage of the fund from originally 18% to 28% because they had lowered the amount of cash they had access to immediately. That still left them with $4.7 billion in the fund. But of that money, $1.9 billion, or about 40%, belonged to the partners themselves. The other thing is, since so many other companies were doing similar deals out in the market, they couldn't find a lot of their regular deals. So they started to take some of their old models and apply it to new markets where they didn't necessarily have much in the way of knowledge base. So there were two problems with the models that they were using. The first, they believed that they could accurately model risk across the world, basically, and across all types of different conditions. That works if you have something you can model, like flipping a coin, for example. A coin, every time you flip it, it doesn't matter what the coin did previously. The coin has no history. So you know that a coin will either be heads or tails. You got 50-50 chance of that. You may not know exactly what's going to happen with that coin for the next 2 flips, but if you did it over 10,000 flips, because of the law of large numbers, you pretty much know that not all 10,000 of those flips are going to end up as heads. If that were to happen, the probability of that happening is so tiny, it can be modeled by this blue curve by the very, very thin tails. The possibility of that happening is very, very small. But they also believe, secondly, in the efficient market idea, the idea that the market is pricing everything perfectly and everybody has the same amount of information. If there is any price discrepancy in the market will find it and drive it to the price it should be. Everything should be very accurate. Unfortunately, traders do not trade logically, they trade emotionally. And especially when things start going sideways in the market, like in 1997, when the Asian market started to have their contamination that went from market to market to market, traders started getting scared and moving their money into safer bets. As a result, the prices had this strange differential because people were moving to safe things and not taking on a lot of risk. As a result, the market is more easily modeled by this pink curve with the fat tails. That indicates that things are going to happen with changing prices, for example, that they're going to be offset far longer than you might expect. And when that starts happening, it started to really destroy their models. The other thing is that they really didn't believe that their models could be wrong. They thought they could model everything. But if there's one thing a financial model cannot do, it cannot tell you what the politicians in the Kremlin are going to do about Russian bonds. And they learned that the hard way in August 17, 1998, when Russia defaulted on their bonds and the ruble was devalued. Long-term capital management had put a lot of bets into those 2 different financial instruments, along with a lot of others. The market began to seize up, and suddenly they were losing tens of millions and hundreds of millions of dollars per day. They sent out a warning to their shareholders 2 weeks later, and 3 weeks later, they were meeting with the Fed and a consortium of Wall Street banks who were kind of forced to pony up $3.6 billion in order to keep long-term capital management afloat. Even with the Fed cutting rates drastically, long-term capital management was dead. If you put any money in it, by the end of 98, all the money was gone. Now, the really amazing part is that these guys from the fund didn't really learn anything. They formed another new fund called JWM Partners. They didn't raise quite as much money as before, and they weren't as highly leveraged as before. But when they hit the economic downturn in 2007, 2008, same thing happened. The best way to describe it is that these guys knew all the Greeks for finances, like alpha, beta, and gamma, but they didn't know the word hubris, another Greek word. Thank you.
Thank you, Georgie. Let's take a minute to give a feedback. Please use the private chat window and provide your feedback to Georgie directly. Okay, so we have our second speaker of the day today. That's Wei Ming. He's going to give a top speech on organizing people example. Wei Ming has been one of our long-time member of the group, and he has been giving speech about different topics, biography, some different things that help us like that we have never seen. So I'm very excited to hear what he's going to talk about today. So that is organizing people example. Let's welcome Wei Ming.
Thank you, Gautam. I just want to confirm you guys can hear me okay.
Yes.
Okay, because apparently the other audio didn't work. It's always good to have multiple connections just in case one doesn't work. So I'm going to start the speech. So I'm going to be talking about a story about how companies are organized. And it's a very interesting story because it's related to Apple Computer. And when Steve Jobs came back to Apple in 1997, he was inheriting a company that's on its dire strait. The company had 8,000 people, but the company was going down the tube. If they didn't have money, everyone is going to be laid off, no more products, nothing. And he had to do something special. When he looked at that situation, he got money. He got money from other people to survive. And then he looked at the organization and he did something very interesting that was documented recently. So I'm just reading from that document. So traditionally with companies, how companies are organized, especially large companies, is you have the CEO and then you divide the company into different business units because they're responsible for their own thing. So in Apple, there was a laptop business unit, there was a business unit around the Newton business unit around the disk and the software. So different parts, and there are different managers responsible for those business units. And under each business unit, you have your finance, your marketing, you have the engineers there, and so on. So this organization, this type of structure has been around for years, since the early 1900s, and was very successful in various companies, especially General Electric. And so all the companies, including Apple at the time, follow that structure. Now, it is very useful in the sense that, if you have a business dealing with aircrafts and a different unit dealing with plastics, you don't necessarily want those guys mixed up. Within Apple, the engineers essentially work on very similar products. So an engineer working on the laptop or the computer might be working on software, but it's somewhat related to the Newton and so on. So what happened is engineers, when they want to go up the chain to advance the career, what happens? They end up at the level of the highest level in engineering within the business unit. But then in order for them to go beyond that, they have to become what they call a generalist, as opposed to be an expert in engineering. So this is an example. Yeah. So in order to become a generalist, you give up your expertise in engineering, and because you have to understand sales and management and products and so on to manage the business. And then if you actually get to that, then you have to sort of move. You can move across business units, and eventually that's your training ground to become CEO. So many people want to do that. However, engineers sometimes they just don't necessarily want to get up to that level. The other thing is it's hard to invent. But when Steve Jobs came back and he looked at that structure, he said, well, this business is going down to, it's too small in a certain sense. So he reorganized everything. And essentially what happened is he removed all the business units. He removed all the general managers, so just fired them. And then reorganize everything in terms of what they call functions. Yeah, so you have your hardware function, your software function, marketing function, and each function has a VP that would report in the CEO. Why would that happen? So he described that as organizing a company as a startup, and that's in 1998. And they had 8,000 people and lay off 4,000 people. In the end, they had 4,000 people a few years later, but then the company grew. He introduced all these new products and it continued to grow. And even in 2011, more than 10 years later, and he was sick, he gave up his role as CEO. The company is still staying this type of structure. And at that time, they have like tens of thousands of people now, a lot bigger than when they started. And in fact, by the time, and the leaders expect to be experts. So they have deep expertise. So each expert in the hardware guys understand hardware, the software guy, and then software. And they also need to understand the details. So they can go down several levels down to the engineer, understand what they're doing. And their responsibility is to collaborate across groups so that the whole company function as a single company, as opposed to competing groups that compete with each other. And they have an example of this particular VP where most of his time is spending owning his stuff and learning new stuff around the technical area he's responsible for. And then the rest is delegated and teaching. And even now, 2019 or 2021, yeah, but in 2019, under Coke, the company is still organized that way. They just added additional functions. And with a lot more revenue, a lot more employee, 137,000 employees, they are still organized like a startup, and they're very successful. In comparison, the traditional way of organizing around businesses where generalists are running the company and they have no expert, they are not doing so well. That company, General Electric, is really doing bad. In fact, there's a book that just came out recently and Bill Gates recommended for the summer, if you're interested in reading, is how General Electric is failing because the generalist could not keep up with the changes in the industry, especially nowadays. Things are changing so fast, they just cannot keep up with the technology and the expertise that's needed to run the companies. So the point is, there may be a new way of running companies and organizing people around experts rather than around generalists. It's important to understand how people organize, especially in companies, because companies, in my mind today, are ways of understanding how we can get several tens of people or hundreds or thousands of people together, and how do you actually be productive? And these companies are experiments of how people could be organized, so that maybe we can build better societies over time. Mr. Toastmaster.
Thank you, Vemi. Let's take a minute to give a feedback to Vemi. Use a private chat and provide your feedback. All right. Thank you everyone for providing your feedback. Let's hear from our evaluators for our speakers. Our first evaluator for our speaker, Georgie. That's Jose. Jose?
Thank you, Mr. Toastmaster Gautam. So this speech by Georgie is part of her ongoing. She had a few speeches on uh, investments. So I was very, very looking forward to hearing from this one. This when she said she was going to go into hedge funds. So I liked her presentation. She's very, very articulate. Georgie, you're very, very articulate. You had s- slight inflections in your speech, and I like the vocal variety whenever you speak. There is a very interesting way you enunciate some certain topics, and I can feel that you are able to express urgency or not urgency in certain topics at certain points of the speech. So those were good. I like your PowerPoint in that there it covers a lot of the key points, and they're very very they're very very detailed, right? Which is very impressive, and it looks like work was done in the regards to it. And I also saw that you made a lot of gestures, which was good. And I like the way you used single hand, right? Maybe you could use the other hand also in certain points. It's a compliment. It's a subconscious compliment to whatever you're saying. So those were good. And so, in terms of maybe adding more into your speech on the topic of hedge funds, I just wanted to give you feedback that when you said hedge funds, the first thing that came to my mind was, oh, this investing. And I would say the subsequent thought in a lot of the audience's thinking is, oh, can I make money out of this? So I think the key point when if you would get into a speech such as this on investing would be to put some kind of a challenging dilemma into your speech. Maybe a good intro, like for example, hedge funds. Do you know what a hedge fund is? Do you know how bad it could be? Something like that. Maybe something that could draw it a little bit more. Maybe a very nice intro, or a very nice challenge, or a very nice takeaway from what your speech is going to be. I think that will draw your audience more. Although I did, like I said, the way you articulate is very, very well. So it's very impressive. And another thing towards the end is, oh, yeah, there's a certain part of your presentation. hedge funds. And the key topic there is losing and how you lost. So I think the audience will be very, very interested in maybe illustrating the numbers of how a person will lose, right? For example, a sample $1,000, and then how a person could lose on such a thing as a hedge fund. And so those are my feedbacks. Again, a very good speech. Looking forward to pointers on your next speech. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Jose. We have our second speaker, that is Wyming. Wyming will be evaluated by Georgie. Georgie?
Hey, thank you, Wang, for giving us that really great speech. You have a really organized way of giving your speeches. You start out with a kind of a snapshot saying what you're going to tell us. Then you go through and just have maybe 3 or 4 points. And then at the end, you give us a summary. Just exactly, that's kind of the standard way that Toastmaster suggests that we give speeches, and it works really, really well. In this case, you start off saying clearly what you were going to talk about. You have very good, what I would call production values. You have really good lighting. I could hear you really well, even though I know you were concerned about that in the beginning. The other thing is I can see your facial gestures really, really well. Sometimes, especially with the lighting, can be really touchy on that. You have a clear background also, so it helps me focus just on you when you're speaking. You also have slides, and the interesting thing was the slides were kind of a mixed bag of slides this time around. Usually you have slides that kind of are similar all the way through. In this case, you had a very simple slide to begin with, then a little bit more detailed slide. And I'm not a graphics person, but it looked like the fonts were kind of changing between things, if things were kind of been layered on top of it. And then you had a really busy slide, about slide number 4 towards the end, and you showed that for maybe 5-10 seconds. And I guess maybe you were concerned about running out of time, so you kind of went over it really quickly. That was the slide that kind of talked about how to be a really good manager by looking at all the different areas. And I didn't really get a chance to examine the different areas, and we didn't really go through the different areas. So while, it was a really nice looking slide, if we're not going to spend a lot of time on it, maybe you might want to make a simpler slide that kind of matches some of the other slides you're doing, because otherwise you get kind of drawn into it and you start to lose track of things. The other thing that I thought you did really well was you did a good job with your gestures and a good job in explaining the story, especially with the different stages of Apple. You even had time to bring in a comparison to GE and a reference to a book that one could read up even more on GE. The thing that I wasn't sure about, you referenced in the beginning, you were referring to a document, but I didn't catch the document name. I was, trying to get things organized, and maybe I wasn't focused and I didn't hear it properly. The other thing was that when you started, maybe you were also kind of rough when you started. You said something like, I'm just going to read from that document. You don't actually need to say that, just skip the actual fundamental aspects of what you're doing. I wouldn't know that you're actually reading from the document until you tell me you're reading, so don't bother with that. Otherwise, I thought it was a very good speech, and I'm looking forward to the next speech you're going to give us. Thank you.
Thank you, Georgie, for the evaluation. All right, I think it's a time for table topics. Let's welcome our table topics master, Elvira, for today's table topics.
Good morning, Mr. Toastmaster, fellow Toastmasters, and most welcome guests. Today's topic is freedom. And I want to refer our topic also to the 19th June, which is a holiday, which is called Juneteenth. A holiday which is known as Freedom Day, Jubilee Day, Liberation Day, Emancipation Day. So we all know what freedom is. And for me, freedom is a lifting, the event of lifting off the iron curtain I used to live under as a former citizen of the USSR. That's my understanding of freedom. But what is yours? And my question is there any volunteers for the question what freedom is for you? How do you understand freedom? Is there any volunteers? No? Okay.
I can.
Okay. Please, yeah, Georgie, please.
Okay. As you guys know, I, as everyone else has been, kind of trapped in my living space for a while. But I spent an awful lot of time also trying to get information from multiple sources. So for me, I don't look at like one news source. I try to look at multiple news sources. And for me, I use YouTube. I look at clips on YouTube to get an idea of what's going on in the world and to get an idea of what other people are seeing in the world at any one time. So I found recently a selection of videos that's been uploaded by a woman who grew up in the United States, but her parents originally from Cuba, and I guess her boyfriend, maybe fiance, I'm not really sure, who is from Cuba and just recently got to the United States. So they've been posting videos lately about all of his first experiences in the United States. And they tend to focus on the materialistic things that we Americans identify with the United States. So for example, they went to like Chipotle, first time he's been there. He went to different supermarkets, Safeway, Costco, that sort of thing. But what was intriguing for me is in Cuba, they have evidently nothing. They've also, in the video, showed clips of what it was like when she visited where he lived in Cuba, and there was absolutely nothing. So then you get his reaction when he walks into a supermarket. And the closest thing I can explain to you is if you've ever seen the Robin Williams movie, Moscow on the Hudson, in which he walks into a supermarket looking for coffee, and he initially looks for the line you're supposed to wait in. And he's told there's no line, just go grab the coffee. And he has a nervous breakdown seeing all these options that no one has to wait in line for. That's kind of like what this gentleman went through. In addition to that, the latest video involves him going to Home Depot. And it was just a man's idea of a toy store, basically. He loved it. But once again, it was interesting to see kind of freedom is the ability to make deals, just put your life together and have the option of everything there so easily for you. So that'd be my kind of materialistic American way of looking at it.
Thank you, Georgie, and thank you, Georgie, for using word materialism, because I forgot actually to encourage from the beginning to use this word for your speeches. Thank you for reminding about that as well, because it actually interconnects the freedom and materialism, because that's what we were reminded as I'm as a student back in the USSR. We were taught about materialism as something very important, that it dictates your reality, and also it actually it's kind of very bad thing to do, because following materialism, because we had to be high-spirited, look after our souls, and think about higher things, up much higher, much better than about our body, about needs. So the next question is, do you think it is about freedom? Do you think materialism is bad thing? And with this question, I would love to ask, let's say, Sora. So I'm not sure if I pronounce
That's
name. I'm sorry if sorry. Do you mind to answer this question? Is it good or bad? Materialism.
Sure, definitely. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak. Materialism could mean different things to different people. Materialism could definitely go into the realms of physical product, physical things that you buy, you can feel. But for other people, materialism could be going out of the way to get things that they do not have access to and they do not actually need, but they want, right? So in my vision, materialism until certain limit is not bad. Things when you just start acquiring things which you don't need, and it gets to a point of hoarding, is when materialism gets to the borderline bad thing. Yeah, sorry, that's pretty much it. Don't have much to add to it. It's a very tricky question you asked.
Thank you, Sora. That was very interesting. Everything is in moderate, probably a good thing for us, in moderation. The slavery, Emancipation Proclamation was issued in 1862 by Abraham Lincoln to free enslaved people across the United States, but it took 2.5 years to reach all the states because of the speed. The news traveled by the horse speed. But nowadays, still lots of changes dependent on the speed of changing change of our minds. Our minds tend to change at a bit slower rate. So my question is, have you experienced change in your mindset from the moment you were introduced to a new idea to the moment it became part of your life, part of your mindset? I can repeat the question if it's not clear. So have you experienced change in mindset from the moment you were introduced, like freedom or something, maybe some aspects of freedom as an idea and then became part of your life? And with this question, I would love to ask someone to volunteer. Waving? Do you mind to answer?
So I'll try to answer in terms of the idea that, let me try to rephrase the question, or at least the way I understand it. When I look at something new related to freedom, somehow it could change in my mind. Hard for me to remember anything like that, but certainly I do change my mind occasionally, and it's very important to be able to change your mind because the world changes all the time. Now, you don't want to be, there's a tension between consistency, that you want to be consistent in terms of how you conduct yourself, how you present yourself, how people perceive you as consistent, as opposed to just randomly changing things. But at the same time, sometimes you have to do that. So one of the things that I do a lot is I drive, because even nowadays I drive to work, and sometimes you have to be consistent in terms of going at 65 miles an hour, but sometimes you go faster and sometimes you go slower, depending on the traffic. And so there is freedom in that. So my suggestion is make sure you can change your speed when you drive. It is no materialism, but it is a way of surviving on the freeway. So I just changed your topic completely. I don't know. Change the driving. This Toastmaster.
Thank you, Wei-Ming. I was a quite actually tricky question. I understand it was a bit complicated. I'll try to ask a bit simpler questions. Next one. So we know that stereotypes can be damaging and blocking, and sometimes comes gets in the way of freedom. But other negative stereotyping, for instance, like it used to be toward, and still probably exists toward, Black people or other people of color. But there are also positive stereotypes. So would you like to be part of a positive or good stereotype? Like Germans considered to be very punctual. So would you like to be part of positive stereotypes? And with this question, Ashwin, would you like to answer this one? You are on mute. Unmute, please, yourself.
Sorry. Sorry, I went to the restroom. Sorry about that. Could you repeat the question, please? Wrong timing.
It's all right, it's all right. So there are negative stereotypes which could be actually limiting us. But there are positive stereotypes. For instance, Germans are very punctual, or Asians are very good at math. So would you like to be part of a positive stereotype?
That's a good question. Positive stereotypes. Bookworm, right? If you read, you think you gain knowledge, you get information. You think if you're a bookworm, then you think you're a nerd, right? That's all you do. But there are positive stereotypes in that a bookworm or someone who reads a lot, you could say that gains information, could have a simple conversation with that person, right? Could attain knowledge, or you can transfer that knowledge, right? So I don't think there's any negative stereotypes of anywhere, but a positive one, anything could be positive if you make it. So I think, like I said, with the bookworm, I think it's a good thing because you could transfer that to your kids. You could transfer that to your family. Reading is fun. I don't think there's any negative things about reading. So I would say a positive stereotype for a bookworm is that you gain knowledge and you can transfer it. Thank you.
Thank you, Ashwin, for sharing your positive stereotype. The stereotype you like to belong to. And women, can you give me timings if we have time for more questions?
It's 8:11, so you have maybe 1 or 2 more.
1, 2 more. Okay, right. So I would love to unquote Martin Luther King. I have a dream that one day, his speech, I think, is one of the famous ones. I have a dream that one day on the red hills of Georgia, the sons of former slaves and the sons of former slave owners will be able to sit down together at the table of brotherhood. So we are pretty much living in his dream, aren't we? That's how powerful his dream was. So my question is, what is your dream of the future? And this question, Gautam, would you like to answer this question?
Sure. Thank you, Elvira. I think it's a difficult question. But to me, the future is unpredictable. So I never work for the future, neither think about the past, instead learn from that. So I expect the future would be good for everyone. People will work towards humanity united together and achieve something that is beneficial to the community. And I'm pretty sure that any artificial things will not materialize and dominate human being. Instead, human will materialize all these artificial things, and they very well understand how they can handle those materialistic things to make any beneficiary to human beings. That's my perspective of future, and I hope even if we face the pandemic like this, we should have a position or a technology or anything to heal any causes this kind of pandemic that gives us. And because we are, across the world, There are many people who are losing their beloved ones, and that is not at all replaceable by anything, and we cannot materialize those. We cannot materialize their pains, but what we can do is we can heal their pains by introducing any anything. Like, we can solve their pain points with the help of the technologies. That's my future. I hope one day it will come. So when there is an issue, we can get the solution or the medicines, whatever it is, that can solve most of our pains. Thank you.
Thank you, Gordon. I think we are very close, I guess, to the ending. Is it right? I mean,
I think we are on time.
yeah, we are up to. Okay, so
You're on mute, Elvira.
so I forgot. So I think we are up. Our time is up for table topics. So I just want to quickly remind what was everyone was saying in their table topics. Georgie said that ability to. I'm sorry. I'm trying to squeeze it in a very short sentence. Georgie said that ability to be part of American materialism is good. That's what I discerned from your speech. Then Zora also agreed with materialism is good in moderation. Wei Ming said change the speed on the highway also is a good idea. I think that when you follow the traffic. Then Ashwin said that positive stereotype about bookworming is good. And Gordon told us that technology will be part of our future, will be heal people and will be a great part of our life. So with that, I'm finishing table topics section, and please vote for the best table topics, and that will be is collecting.
Yep. Thank you, Elvira. I think it's me.
The link. Yeah. Okay. So that's and thank you. Back to you, Gautam.
All right. Thanks, Elvira. Thank you everyone for joining today's table topics. So in the meantime, before I call our duty masters, so we have the link shared in the chat. Please give your vote, and look, we have our speakers and evaluators, and we have our table topics speakers. Please evaluate and provide your vote on that link. All right. Let's call our duty masters for today, and we have our timer. That's Wei Ming. Can you please give us a report how we did in timing?
Yes, Mr. General Evaluator, fellow Toastmasters, most welcome guests. I just want to read off the time in the speeches. Georgie spoke for 9 minutes and 50 seconds. I spoke for 7:15 in the evaluation. Jose 3:17, Georgie 3:08. Table topics, Georgie 2:32, Sarab 55 seconds, myself 1:34, Ashwin 1:14, and Gautam 2:06. Mr. General Evaluator.
Thank you, Vami. We have a grammarian, Georgie. Georgie, how did we do it in grammar?
Okay. Gautam, I like the way you said freedom has different flavors. I thought that was an interesting juxtaposition. And also you use materialize in an interesting way, a person who can materialize things. But you did use, let's see, don't let yourself hold by anything. I think that sounded a little, I wasn't quite sure what you meant by that. I think maybe you meant don't let yourself be held back by anything. It was the way I think you meant it. You also said, which I thought was interesting, that you never work for the future since it was unpredictable. That's so non-Silicon Valley. It's amazing to me. So, because we're always seem like we're always working to the future around here. Let's see. Elvira, you said our minds seem to change at a much slower rate, and you change part of your mindset. Once again, I thought that was really very descriptive. Let's see. And Waming, you used the phrase organize as a startup. I thought that was very cool the way it was done, and also organize around experts as opposed to generalists. I thought that really summarized your speech really well. And that was what I found for today.
Thank you, Georgie, for providing us the grammarian report. That was really helpful. We have our word master of the day today, that's Jose, and our word master is, and the word of the day today is materialism. Jose,
Yes,
with you.
thank you, Mr. General Evaluator. The word for today is materialism. Uh, I see a few people used it. Elvira, Sarab, Ming. Sorry, my Russia, I missed that. But anybody else say the word? Okay, I may have missed somebody else. Okay, thank you. That's my report. Thank you.
Thank you, Jose. We have our joke master. I mean, if you need some time, you can
Yeah,
take and
I
come
can
up with that.
give a joke. In fact, I have two jokes.
Go
So
ahead.
a very quick joke is this little girl in school was wearing a Fitbit. So the teacher asked her, so are you keeping track of your steps? The little girl said, no, my mom gave it to me, so then she can show it to my daddy in the evening. So anyway, so that's one joke. The second joke is more interesting, is in early January, the school board of San Francisco voted to rename all the schools, high schools and so on, because there are those names like Abraham Lincoln's High School and George Washington are all associated with colonialism and slavery. So they want freedom everywhere. So they try to rename all those schools, 44 schools. They actually voted to rename all those schools. And then people were saying, well, you should also rename the city of San Francisco, because San Francisco is associated with all these Spaniards who took over the California and eliminated a lot of the Indians and so on. And also that was colonialism as well. So people were quandary. So in April, finally, for all these other reasons, they decided not to do any of the renaming. So that was sort of a joke. Mr. Toastmaster.
Thank you, Amy. Okay, so we have our counter report. I think I noticed most of us didn't use much of filler words. Georgie used very few one. Miming 4, Jose 3, Elvira 2, Saurabh and Annabelle I didn't notice much. And myself it's around 5, and Ashwin it's around 3. Thank you everyone for using your O's and having control of that. Okay, so overall the meeting went well, and though we started on time, but we couldn't fill the role. I think it would have been better the roles were filled previously. And Georgie, I have one comment for your slides. The slides resolution and the font is like kind of strict when you use an image. So I don't know if that is because of the Zoom or if that's because of the presentation resolution. So I would really encourage you to check the recording and see whether you can use it, especially when you showed the tables and the graph. All the images were like kind of strict. So that causes some distortion to me, maybe personally. But other than that, slides were really very well organized. On Elvira, the speech topic, that was really good. I mean, that was like so come up with different flavors. I really like it. Thank you for coming up with the topics. So just a reminder, please vote yourself and for our today's speakers, evaluators, and the topics, table topics, speakers. So that's all I have. I forgot to vote. Let me do it.
Thank you. Thank you, Gautam. Thank you for your general evaluation. Thank you. So we're now towards the end of our meeting. So I would like to ask our guests for any comments in regards to what what their opinions of meetings and what they was able to extract from meetings. Thank you. Yeah. Yes, Ashwin. Yes.
Hey, thank you everyone for having me here. I love the meeting, love the speakers too. Great topics, especially early in the morning once you had a great cup of coffee. I'm still working on this. Yeah, meeting went well. It's great meeting you guys. What I would like, it would be great if I could get an agenda or something. That way I could follow. But the topics were great. Table topics, the evaluations were great too. So thank you for having me here.
Thank you, Ashwin. Yes, I find Toastmasters as like a natural coffee, right? All the activity, all the things that you have to do, and early in the morning, it wakes you up. So that's the benefit. And so, yes, anybody else with comments? Nothing. Okay. So we let's see. Anybody has announcements we would like to cover in regards to our future plans? Okay. All right. Thank you. And so, okay. Roles for next week. Who would like? Let me see now. Next week is on the 23rd. Anybody want? Wyoming will be our Toastmaster. Yes. And then I'll be putting in a speaker. Anybody else? Yes. Well, Elva, you would like to be
A speaker.
speaker too? Okay. Speaker. Okay. Anybody for table topic? Table topic.
I can do table topics.
Table topic is Georgie. Okay. I'll go ahead and fill in the roles, the rest of the roles towards the rest of the week. And so, let's do our drum roll for the awards. Everybody, drum roll. For our best table topics, it will be Ashvin. Ashvin, congratulations. Yeah. And for our best evaluator, it'll be Jose Me. So thank you. Thank you. And then for our best speaker, let's drum roll for our best speaker is Georgie. Congratulations, Georgie. Yes. Okay. Thank you, everyone. I think that ends our speech. Anybody with no announcements, nothing like that? I'll be here for a few more minutes, and in regards to any topics in regards to VP of Education, I think I'd like to cover with some of the